All right, so good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from, everyone. My name is Jesse, and I am with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. If you're joining us for the first time, and I think we do have a few new kids joining us today, we are all about bringing conservation, science, and adventure into classrooms and homes around the world. So thank you so much for taking time out of your busy weeks, busy months, to spend some time with us as we continue to highlight amazing scientists and explorers from around the world. If you're joining in on YouTube today, let me know where you're joining from in the chat bar. I'd love to get a sense of where our teachers are from all over Canada and the United States. But live with us, we have groups in Wisconsin, California, Minnesota, and Virginia. So welcome in to a really diverse audience across the United States. Today's topic is something that's a little bit unique. We've never done anything quite like it. We've covered birds before. Birds are one of our most popular topics. Classrooms love to hear about birds. They're amazing animals, and there's a lot of great sessions in our past on our YouTube channel. But today we're going to talk about one of the chief dangers to some birds, and migratory birds especially, and that is windows. So danger in the city, birds and windows is our topic today. We're going to dive in and understanding the threats that glass facades present to birds worldwide, and then some of the tips and tricks that we have to help mitigate that threat and save birds around the world. So I'm going to turn it over to Lisa Horn. She's an ecologist. She works in this area especially. She's an author. She's a researcher. She's done all sorts of really amazing stuff. Lisa, thank you so much for joining us today, and take us away.
Awesome. Thank you, Jesse, so much for the introduction, and thank you all for being with me here today to learn about a conservation issue that's really, really important to me. So I was hoping to take everybody on a bit of a journey today to learn about the amazing world of birds right in our cities, one of the major dangers that they face, and what we can all do to help them. So to tell you a little bit about myself, I spend a lot of time going out and looking for birds. My job as an ecologist is going out to survey birds and other wild animals, but I also do a lot of bird watching in my spare time. It's one of my favorite things to do. And the cool thing about looking for birds is that it doesn't matter where you live. You could probably go outside right now and walk around for a minute and see and hear birds. Birds are everywhere. They're in our cities, in agricultural areas, in forests, in remote areas, and they're probably one of the types of wild animals that we get to interact with on a daily basis, even if you live in the city. And you might already be familiar with some types of birds, like maybe crows or blue jays or even American robins. But there's really an amazing diversity of birds that you might not be aware of. You might go to a natural area in your city and see two tree swallows having a bit of an argument with each other, or a really, really itchy yellow warbler. And if you're super lucky, you might get to see an eastern whippoorwill having a nap on a log. So I love going out in nature. I love watching birds be birds, interact with each other, and just do what they do. But at a certain point, I decided that I kind of wanted to get to know them even better than just looking at them through a pair of binoculars. So I started volunteering at a bird banding station. And this was one way to get really, really up close and personal with these birds. So bird banding stations, they track birds during their spring and fall migrations. So when they're traveling between their southern wintering areas and their northern breeding areas. So at the bird banding station during spring and fall, we set up these big nets to safely catch migrating birds. We take them out of the net, we look at the bird, we say, okay, what type of bird is that? What species? Is it a boy or a girl? How old is it? And then each bird gets a little tiny metal band on its leg. And this band has a completely unique number on it. So it kind of actually becomes like the name of that bird. So we'll let that bird go. That bird will continue its migration, and hopefully somewhere along the way, it'll get caught by another bird banding station. And the people at that station can look up that number, find out where that bird was banded before. And this is one way that people can use to map out the migration routes of birds. We can find out where are these birds actually going during migration, because once they leave our breeding areas, their breeding areas, we don't necessarily know where they go unless we track them. So we can figure out where they're going, how far they go, and where they're spending the winter. It turns out that a lot of these tiny little birds are making pretty incredible journeys. So this is a black-throated blue warbler right here, and this is a bird that we catch pretty frequently at the bird banding station. So he'll come up to Ontario to breed in the summer, And then as soon as the cold weather starts setting in the fall, he'll head south and spend the winter in the Caribbean. And that seems like a pretty solid plan. Maybe some of you have done that before in the past. You go to warmer areas on vacation in the winter to escape the cold. But the journey for this little bird is much more difficult than hopping on an airplane or just driving down south for us. Obviously, he has to fly the entire way. And this bird might be making a trip of around 3,000 kilometers. That's a crazy distance for a bird who weighs as much as a couple of coins. He really doesn't weigh all that much. And the journey for him is difficult and dangerous. There are some times where they have to fly over big stretches of open water, and there's no place to rest. If they get tired, they're going to drown. They have to keep on going. They might encounter storms along the way, either hurricanes, or sometimes there's even snowstorms in the spring, which can be really dangerous for these birds. And they always have to be careful about predators like hawks and cats and owls. The journey is also really, really tiring, and birds can't make it all in one go. They have to take breaks along the way to rest and to refuel. But as more and more cities and urban areas develop, there's less and less natural habitats for these birds to stop in along the way. So this means that during spring and fall migration, a lot of birds are actually stopping in cities because they are looking for any green space and places where they think that they can find some bugs or some fruit or some seeds to refuel and continue along their way. So they end up stopping in urban parks and woodlots, and sometimes even your own backyard. During spring and fall migration, we can see a huge number of birds right in the city that we wouldn't see at any other time of the year. So the fact that these tiny birds make this journey, all of the challenges that they face along the way, was just such a fascinating topic for me. And I decided that I wanted to actually go to university to study bird migration. So I moved to Toronto with my boyfriend, who is also a bird lover. I moved to Toronto to attend York University and study bird migration. And as I was walking along on campus between classes and teaching, I started noticing something really, really terrible. I started seeing the birds that I had enjoyed watching in the wild with my binoculars and at the bird banding station, but they weren't singing happily in the woodlots on campus. They were dead. And it wasn't just one or two birds here and there. This was all different kinds of species in a whole bunch of different locations on campus. I was absolutely heartbroken to see this happen to the birds that I loved so much. And glass windows were to blame for their deaths, because the issue with all of these birds passing through cities on their migration is that now they have to deal with all of the dangers, the human-caused dangers that we've thrown in their path. And windows are one of those dangers, because birds don't understand that glass is a solid object. When they look at something like this, they see sky, they see trees and shrubs and vegetation. They don't realize that that's not the real thing. They don't realize that that's a reflection. So they fly towards it and they hit the windows. And some people like to say that birds are stupid if they hit windows, but I would like to remind people that humans have trouble understanding glass as well. There are so many videos on YouTube about people walking into glass doors because it happens all the time. And it's probably not something you've thought about before, but why would you think that glass bus shelters or glass entrances to buildings, why do some of them have patterns in the glass midway up or at chest level? It's so that people can see that it's glass and so they don't walk into it. It happens often enough that they have to put these markings on the glass for people. But the difference between you walking into a glass door and a bird flying into a glass door is that you're pretty big and you're slow. So if you walk into a glass door, it'll probably be painful and probably very embarrassing, but you're not going to die. A bird, on the other hand, a lot of these birds are super tiny and they're really, really fast. When they fly into a window, they fly at full speed. And for them, it's often fatal. I'm not sure if anybody can think of the last time that they've gone through a day without seeing glass, because glass is everywhere. We live in houses that have glass windows. You go to school in buildings that have glass windows. Your parents might work in an office that has glass windows. We go shopping in buildings that have glass. Glass is just everywhere. So this is an issue that affects birds everywhere there's glass, and millions of birds across Canada die because of this every single year. So this photo that I have up here now, this is just a few of the probably millions of birds that died in Toronto in 1 year because of hitting glass windows. So these are birds that have been collected by volunteers that go downtown and patrol the streets, and they mark exactly where they're finding birds, and they collect these for different purposes. So this is just, it's an issue everywhere there's glass. And some of the birds that hit windows, though, they actually survive the collision. And maybe you've even had this happen at your home before, if you've had a bird hit your window and it looks kind of like it's just stunned, that it might need a little bit of time to rest and that it's going to fly away and be okay. But a lot of these birds have serious injuries which you can't see from the outside. So I want you to think of a bird hitting a window kind of like being in a car accident, but without the protection of a car or airbags. If anybody was in a car accident, very likely they'd be taken to the hospital to be checked out by a doctor. A bird that's hit a window also needs to see a doctor. Obviously, you wouldn't take it to a hospital, but you take it to a wildlife hospital, because these are people who are trained and experienced with treating these small birds, with treating their injuries. And yeah, these birds need medical attention. So that's something that's really important for them to get, to be able to continue their migration, because a lot of these birds are hitting windows during migration, and they might still have thousands of kilometers to go to get to where they need to be. And as we learned, that's a difficult journey for a healthy bird. How is an injured bird supposed to complete that journey? So going back to York University for a second, I was finding all of these dead and injured birds on campus, and I had to do something about it. So together with my boyfriend, who I mentioned is also a bird lover, we started patrolling the campus during spring and fall migration and looking for birds that needed to be taken to get medical attention, so who had hit windows and needed help. And there were some areas on campus that were clearly very, very dangerous for birds. So for example, that top photo there, some buildings, basically the entire outside of the building is glass. So the more glass, the more dangerous. Vegetation near buildings, trees and shrubs and green roofs are also very dangerous, because when birds are migrating over and they're looking for a place to stop, they're looking for vegetation, they're looking for trees and shrubs and any green space that they think that they can find some food. So when they do stop in urban green space, that brings them close to buildings. So buildings with a lot of glass, buildings that are close to vegetation and natural areas, those are really, really dangerous buildings. So we started walking around campus, and we needed rescue supplies, because you can't just find an injured bird and carry it around until you get to rehab. You need to have a nice little carrier for it. And what we used most often for small birds like a sparrow or a chickadee, we'd actually use unwaxed paper bags. So the type of bags that you might use to make crafts or to store your lunch in. And we would open up those bags, we take tissue and we'd roll it up into like a little bit of a log so that the bird would have something soft to perch on. We'd put that tissue in the bag, we'd take the bird, put it in the bag, close it up with a paper clip. And that would be a nice little carrier that the bird would be kind of dark and feel a little bit safer until we could get it to the wildlife rehabilitation place. We also carried around a cardboard box with air holes already poked in, sometimes for bigger birds or for a bird like a woodpecker, who would just peck through a paper bag in a second. We also sometimes needed to use a net, like that's the green thing in the background there. And we also had brochures with information about why birds hit windows and what people can do to stop it, because sometimes people were a little bit confused or curious when they saw us walking around with our nets around buildings. So they would ask us what we're doing, what we're looking for. And it was nice to have something to give them as a conversation starter about the issue. The birds that we would rescue each morning, we would take them to a wildlife hospital in Toronto called Toronto Wildlife Centre, which is a fantastic organization that treats all kinds of wild animals, not just birds. And when we brought these birds in, they got assessed by somebody who was trained in wildlife rehabilitation. They'd look for different kinds of injuries. Sometimes they need to do special tests. They might need to do x-rays to look for broken bones. They needed sometimes these special equipment to look into birds' eyes for injuries. And then once they knew exactly what types of injuries that bird had, they were put on a special treatment plan. So sometimes that might mean medication. Sometimes they needed a cast or something like that. And as soon as these birds had recovered and were strong enough to continue the rest of their migration, they were released back into the wild. So rescuing injured birds was really, really important to us. We wanted to give them a second chance at continuing their migration. But we weren't just rescuing birds, we were also marking down exactly where on campus we were finding dead and injured birds. So this here is a map of the York University campus on something called the Global Bird Collision Mapper. And this is a really cool website that you can check out by going to the link at the bottom, birdmapper.org. And anywhere you live, you can look on this map and see if somebody else has reported a bird hitting a window or birds hitting windows in your areas. And if you see a bird hitting a window either at your home or somewhere else, you can also put it into this map, because the more people report exactly where birds are hitting windows, the more we can see if there are certain areas that are more dangerous. Are there hot spots that more birds are being killed? And this is what we were doing at York University. It might be a little bit hard to see the numbers on the map here, but as we were looking through this data, we started seeing that there were hot spots on campus as well. There were some areas that were really, really dangerous. And most often it was because there was a lot of glass, maybe there was a lot of vegetation nearby, and sometimes it was the layout of the building that it just kind of made it really hard for birds to escape, that they got stuck in a courtyard or something like that. So we're hitting windows while they were trying to escape. So we know it's an issue, but what do we do to stop birds from hitting windows? How can we stop them from hitting windows? And I was curious if anybody has ever seen something like this on a window before. So to stop birds from hitting windows, some people say, okay, you take these hawk silhouettes or falcon silhouettes, you put one or two on a big window, and it's supposed to stop the birds from hitting them. But I am here to tell you that does not work. Birds don't look at that and say, oh, that's a falcon, that's a predator, I'm going to fly away. They look at it and they say, oh, that's a barrier, I'm going to fly around it. And birds are really, really good at avoiding barriers, because in the wild, they fly around through tree branches, through shrubs and bushes and things like that. They're really, really good at going through pretty small openings between leaves and branches. So what's going to happen is that a bird's going to fly towards that. They're going to realize, oh, I have to go around it, and they're going to hit another portion of the glass that is not treated. So to stop birds from hitting windows, what we need to do is we need to make them understand that the entire surface of the glass is a barrier that they can't fly through. And we need to give them visual signals. So we can use something like dots or something that they will look at and realize, okay, I can't fly through that, I'm just gonna fly away. So we need to make sure that these dots are close enough that birds aren't going to try to fly through them. And what we found so far is that to be protective of small birds, like a chickadee or a hummingbird, for example, that could go through really small holes, we need to make sure that these markers on the glass are no more than 2 inches or 5 centimeters apart. So this is an effective way to stop birds from hitting windows. But having a solution is kind of only part of the challenge here, because how do you convince York University to actually do something about this issue? Because treating buildings costs money. They have probably around 100 buildings on campus. you can't just treat all of them because that would cost a lot of money. So how do you convince them to do something about it? And let's just recap for a second what we knew about the situation at York University. We knew the most dangerous areas on campus because we had done monitoring. We had made maps, and we can see that some buildings are more dangerous, some sides of buildings are even more dangerous because they're close to vegetation or things like that. We also know that there are solutions, that if we put visual markers on the outside of the glass, on the entire surface of the glass, birds can look at that and say, that's a barrier, I can't fly through that, and they're not going to hit the window. And one thing that I didn't mention is that we also had support on campus. There were a lot of people who thought that this was an issue that we should do something about, that we should try to prevent these deaths from happening. If there's a solution, we should do something about it. So together with my research supervisor, who also studies birds, she's been a professor at the university for decades, we went to York University with a proposal. We said, here's the problem on campus. This many birds are dying. This is where they're dying. If we focus on treating these most dangerous buildings, instead of wasting money treating the areas that don't necessarily need to be treated, we can help save a lot of birds' lives. And I'm very pleased to say that York University actually accepted our proposal and ended up putting bird-friendly window treatments in 6 different really dangerous locations on campus. The first 2 photos here are showing the installation of the window treatment. So it came in sheets like that the contractors would put on the windows and then peel off, and it would leave those dots. Some of the buildings were really, really tall. I think the tallest one might have been about 5 stories tall. So sometimes they needed special equipment to be able to get them that high. And the last photo shows the final product. So it's just a whole bunch of dots on the glass over the entire surface of the glass. And I think it actually looks quite nice. I think some people, you're used to looking through clear windows and don't want anything blocking the view. But when you look at that from the inside and looking outside, they're really hardly visible. So the thing is that, I don't want anybody to think that this is an issue that is only happening in big cities, because glass is everywhere. It happens anywhere there's glass. And in fact, scientists in Canada think that 90%, so most of the birds that die from hitting windows in Canada, are actually dying at people's homes, because there are so many homes out there. They're a really numerous type of building. But this means that there's something that we can all do to help birds have a safe migration. We can treat the windows where we live. And here are just some ideas for things that you could do at home to help birds see your windows so that they don't have a collision with them. One thing you can do is to hang ribbons or strings in front of the window on the outside of the glass. You can choose any type of stencil you like. Here showing a maple leaf. You can do hearts or stars or just whatever you like, and use paint pens to trace them on the glass. You just have to make sure that they're close enough together, that you don't just do 1 or 2. Make sure they're close together. You can buy a special dot tape to actually leave these dots on your windows 2 inches or 5 centimeters apart, the proper spacing. You can use tempera paint on the windows on the outside and just draw whatever patterns you like. And if you're really in a pinch, you can even take a bar of soap and just draw patterns on the outside of the glass. And then when migration is over, you can wash it off if you want. You can put it on again before the next migration season, and that will also help the birds see that that's a barrier that they can't fly through. So I'm going to wrap up now, and I just wanted to provide a couple of more sources for information in case people are interested in learning more about this issue. So FLAP Canada is an organization that I volunteer with, and they're really the leaders in the issue of bird window collisions. They do a lot of advocacy and outreach work. They do policy development, research, and their website is a really good resource. So you can go to flap.org, and birdsafe.ca is also a really excellent website to go for more information about making your windows safer for birds. And I'm just leaving my email address up there in case anyone after the presentation, after the Q&A, if you have any more questions, please don't hesitate to send me an email because I am always happy to talk about birds. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Lisa. So if you want to come out of screen share now so you can see us, I'll make sure that people get that email and those links at the end of the broadcast too. We've got a bunch of groups tuning in on YouTube. So Mr. Hancock and Zappy Crawfish, you guys have been asking all sorts of great questions all session long. We had a bunch more groups join us in Pennsylvania and Ontario too after we had got underway. So welcome into those classrooms. And so let's dive in with questions. I'm going to go to Mount Horeb, Wisconsin first. To Zeke and Joe, you guys have a question to kick us off? Go for it.
Yeah. So, would our blinds or window screens work?
Yeah.
Okay, that is a really, really good question. So, window screens. If window screens are on the outside of the window, theoretically, if they're far enough away from the window and a bird hits that, it kind of acts like a trampoline. So the bird doesn't hit the glass. It might not get as injured. But I do know that birds still hit window screens. Like they don't really see it as a barrier and they can still make that mistake. So it's always still a good idea to treat the windows. Blinds, on the other hand, curtains, they oftentimes do not do anything because they're on the inside of the window. So the outside sky and vegetation will still be reflecting off of the window. So birds, it doesn't look like a barrier to them.
Yeah. Fascinating. There you go. I didn't know that. All right, let's go to Ms. Becker's class. They're joining us in lovely San Diego, California. So, Ms. Becker, if you have a question for us, come on up.
I don't at this time.
Okay, we'll come back in a little bit. And if you think of anything, fantastic. Let's go to Ms. Oak's class, Eden Prairie, Minnesota. Welcome in, guys. Go for it.
Yeah, one of our questions was, are there different kinds of glass that could be I guess in new buildings used that would limit birds striking, like a one-way glass or something? We know older buildings already have their windows, but is there a way to prevent this in new buildings?
Yeah, that's a super question. So in cities like Toronto, we actually have guidelines for new buildings being constructed to make sure that they actually have bird-friendly glass. So there's different methods that they say that people can use. Sometimes they recommend the dots, or sometimes they recommend other types of treatments. So more and more cities around North America are actually starting to adopt regulations that buildings have to be built with birds in mind so that we don't create these really, really dangerous situations.
Yeah, fantastically. So, by the way, I just want to note again, if you want to get rid of your screen share so you can see us a little better, you're welcome to end screen share anytime.
Oh, I thought I did.
Oh, okay. It's fine. We don't see it. I'm just making sure for you that you're all good. Yeah.
Good.
Mr. Hancock's class is joining us in Georgetown, Ontario. Comes into so many sessions, so many great questions here today. So we're going to change tack a little bit. He wants to know, how easy is it to tag a bird and how do you catch them, Lisa?
Okay, that's a fun question too. So bird banding stations, they catch them with these nets. And what they do is they set up the nets in habitats that they know that the birds are going to be looking for food in. So trees and shrubs, and you put these nets in between some of the trees and shrubs. So as they're going from tree to tree, that they don't see the net, it's supposed to be like an invisible kind of mesh net. They fly into the net and they fly into a little pocket in there. So they're kind of safely contained until the people at the bird banding station, they go and they catch them. So these nets are used all over. They're really, really effective at catching songbirds. And yeah, applying the band to the leg is very, very easy as well, because once you have the bird in the hand, you just have the little band, you put it in pliers and you put it over the bird's leg. It doesn't hurt them at all. You just close it. It's like a bracelet.
Awesome. I'll recommend to all our classes that are live or on YouTube, our sessions with the Lucky Peak Research Stations. I just put that on the screen at the bottom. A few weeks ago, we did live songbird banding and live hawk banding on camera for a bunch of sessions. So it was really, really cool. So if you want a nice natural follow-up to this talk, do check that out. All right, we're going to go to Chloe now. If you guys have a question for us, you had your hands up, so I'll come to you, and then I'll come to our other live classes. So just demute your microphone, guys. You're good to go.
Hi.
Have you
seen less birds dying since you put the things on the window?
Yeah. Thank you so much for that question. Yes, we have noticed less birds hitting the windows because they are seeing it as a barrier. And Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, I didn't get to do a lot of monitoring in every single location that we put it up, but the ones that we did monitor, it has been effective. And in fact, I have not found any dead or injured birds there after they put that up.
Yeah. Fantastic. Great question, guys. I was wondering when we were going to get that one. All right, let me share another question on YouTube, and then we're going to go to our DDRW class joining us live. So Zappy Crawfish on YouTube wants to know, what species of birds die from hitting glass most? Is there something that's particularly liable to do this or not?
Yeah, so on campus, what we were noticing, there definitely are species that seem to hit windows more often than others. So we got a lot of these long distance migratory songbirds. So the birds that are going to the tropics to spend the winter and coming all the way up here. Because we also have birds that spend the entire year in the same spot. So birds that are just a resident the entire year round. So migratory birds seem to hit windows more often, and maybe that's because they're passing through areas that maybe they haven't seen before. So they don't know how to navigate it as good as a bird who actually lives there. But in terms of species, a lot of warblers, different kinds of warblers, white-throated sparrows, dark-eyed juncos. There's a lot of kinds that seem to hit windows more, and a lot of them are those little tiny migratory songbirds.
Yeah. Another area where more research helps, and this is something that we cover a lot in these broadcasts, the idea that the more we know about this, the more researchers like you are out there finding this sort of thing out, the more equipped we'll be to target these issues and solve them, which is fantastic. All right, Ms. Arcan's class joining us in Oakville. Come on in and go for it.
Hi.
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 I have a quick question. What is stopping people from putting dots on windows, and how can we get the word out and let more people know?
Nice.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that question. I think one of the things that might be stopping people is because a lot of people actually don't know about this issue. It's not something that you think about because windows aren't really harmful to people unless you accidentally walk into them, which probably, I don't think that that's happening everybody, that's happening to everybody every day. So a lot of people don't think that windows are dangerous. They don't necessarily know about this issue, and they don't think about the millions of birds, billions probably, that are passing through that, you don't necessarily see them unless you look for them. So it might be an education thing that more people have to know that this is an issue. Another thing that people are maybe worried about is cost, but there's lots of ways that you can do things pretty cheaply. So on my windows at home, I have those strings hanging in front of the windows, and that was actually free to make because I had the string hanging around from something else. So I made those myself. So cost. And then in terms of getting the word out, definitely that's something that you can talk to your friends and family about and try to educate people that, hey, did you know that this is an issue, that you can do something to stop it? Because that's the good thing about this issue. We all have the power to do something about it. And especially if you feed birds, if you have bird feeders at your home, you're attracting birds into your yard and maybe making it more likely that they're going to hit a window. So especially if notice that somebody has a bird feeder or lots of vegetation near their house, you could say, hey, this is an issue and this is something that you could do about it to help these birds have a safe migration.
Fantastic, guys. And again, you put this at the end of your slide deck. Flap.org, birdsafe.ca. I'm going to keep harping on these. These are amazing websites. You can learn all sorts of things about these issues in general and how you can take action. So I'd encourage you to check that out when you're done the broadcast. All right, let's head to Miss Hoffman's class in Ackglen, Pennsylvania. I swear we have the entire town of Ackglen has joined us at one time or another. Miss Hoffman's, come on in. Welcome in, guys.
Hi. Does anyone have a question? No, we don't have any questions at this time.
That's okay. If you think of any, let me know in the chat bar and I'll come back. One thing I'd like to ask, Lisa, is on the news often we hear about other things that affect bird mortality. We hear about wind turbines, we hear about cats. Could you explain a little bit about where buildings and window collisions fit into that sort of hierarchy? Like what should be, we're very worried about windows. Are there other things we should be worried about? What should we be worried about the most, perhaps?
Yeah. I think a lot of these birds are facing so many different kinds of threats, and there's different kinds of threats because there's ways that humans are kind of directly killing birds, like windows or letting your cats outside. And then there's also the danger of habitat loss, and that habitats are becoming lower and lower quality. So the birds that are coming here, they don't necessarily have a home to breed in. They can't raise a family, or the habitat is just not good enough for them to successfully raise a family. So habitat loss is a really, really major issue. But in terms of ways that humans are directly killing birds, from the studies that scientists have done, they've put cats actually at the top. So both cats that people own, that they let roam outside during the day, they kill a huge number of birds, but also feral cats, so cats that aren't owned by anyone, who just roam around during the day. They kill a lot of wildlife. And then windows are underneath that. So they're the second leading cause of bird death. But I think that because there's so many things threatening them, it's hard to just focus on one. We kind of have to try to reduce all of these different threats kind of at the same time.
And that's a really good message to leave off on. One of the things that we've done with Adam Smith, has joined us before, a doctor in Ottawa. He's done some amazing presentations, is highlighting all the bird species and the general loss of birds around the world, and some of the groups that have been increasing because of noted conservation efforts. So Adam Smith's presentation is another great follow-up to this. Again, a lot of bird love going on here at Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. So Miss Becker and Miss Hoffman's class, if you guys do have any questions at any point, you can let me know in the chat bar and I'll come to you live. I'm going to assume that you don't until you do that. I do want to go back to Mount Orb, to Joe, if you have a question for us, a second question. Joe, come on back in and demute your mic and you're good to go.
Yes, I do. Do you have a favorite kind of bird?
Ooh,
No pressure.
Thanks for that question. It's kind of a hard question because I really love all birds, but because the winter is coming, I'm going to choose the dark-eyed junco, which is a bird that, at least where I live in Ontario, we get these birds coming, especially in the winter. They might stop at bird feeders and stuff around here. And they're a type of sparrow. They don't really look like a sparrow. They're gray and they have a really cute white belly. And the reason that I like juncos, and this is probably going to sound kind of strange, is that I feel that they're very trustworthy birds, that you can listen to what they're saying, and sometimes they let you in on secrets about what's happening around them. So birds, they don't only sing, they also have calls that they use with each other to say, just to stay in contact with each other, or to say, oh, there's a predator or there's something to be worried about. And I feel with juncos, they have a really I find their alarm call really recognizable. It sounds like somebody sucking the front of their teeth. So when I go out in the winter, when I go looking for birds, if I hear junco alarm calls, I always listen, because they're always telling me something that's going on that I probably didn't notice before. So if there's a hawk in a tree nearby that I didn't see, or one time I even noticed that there was a group of people doing monitoring in a stream nearby that I didn't notice before until I was listening to the junco's alarm calls and trying to figure out what they were actually talking about. So yeah, that's why I like juncos a lot.
That is a great answer. I love it. All right. We're going to come back to Ms. Arcan's group. You don't need to type in the chat bar. We'll come to you live, I promise. I want to take one question from YouTube, and then we'll go to Ms. Oakes, Chloe, and Ms. Arcan's back to back to back. So Mr. Hancock wanted to know, where can I purchase the tape with the dots in it? My question exactly. So Lisa, where can we get this stuff?
Yeah, so the photo that I showed about what you can do at home, that is called feather friendly tape. So you can just search feather friendly on the internet, and you can order the rolls, and they ship them to your home. So that's feather friendly. And also what was installed on the windows at York University was also feather friendly. It was the same product, but for large commercial buildings.
Excellent. So go check that out. Again, I'll leave it on the bottom of the screen for a second while we bring up our next questions. So Ms. Arcans, I'll come to you in just 2 seconds. Chloe, if you guys want to demute your mic, come on back up and share with us.
We live in Calgary, Alberta, and it's really cold, like -30, and we're wondering, because sometimes tiny birds are outside in the cold.
How did they survive?
Yeah, how do they survive? What are they doing in the cold?
Yeah, so the birds that stay the winter, they can still find food in the winter. So for birds to stay warm in those temperatures, they need to have feathers, which they do, that will help keep them warm. And they also need to be able to find lots of food. So a lot of the birds that are staying over the winter, they're birds that eat things like seeds that they can still find over the winter. They might visit bird feeders. So as long as these birds are finding enough food and their feathers are in good shape, they're working really well to keep them warm, then they actually do fine in the winter.
Yeah. Outstanding. It's funny you mentioned being in Calgary. Our session we did just before this was in Banff National Park, just down the road from you guys, where they were standing in frigid streams with tons of snow all around them. So, getting us ready here in Ontario. All right, Ms. Argan's class, you guys had a great question in the chat, but let's share it live. Go for it.
I was just gonna ask if Lisa has a pet bird.
Thank you so much for asking that question. Yes, I do have a pet bird. I have a budgie named Jellybean, and today is her birthday. She turned 5 years old.
That is the best, most ridiculous answer ever. Thank you for that. All right, happy birthday, Jellybean. You know what? In fact, you know what I'll do? I'm going to bring all the classes in. You guys want to join me in saying happy birthday to Jellybean? Happy birthday, Jellybean.
Happy birthday,
Jellybean.
Jellybean.
Here. Thank you for that. Lisa, this has been great. So we're nearing the end of the session. Amazingly, time flies when you're having fun. Huge thanks for introducing us to your budgie as well. We really appreciate that. I do want to bring up again for all the students at home, flap.org and birdsafe.ca, incredible websites to learn more about these issues. If you want to learn more about birds through our program, Lucky Peak Research Station, Adam Smith, amazing sessions we've done in the past. And Lisa, but she's a glutton for punishment. It's her first time ever joining us. She gave her email, so if you're keen on asking more questions, I know we had some groups on YouTube with more than we could possibly answer. Check out her email there. You can share them with her, and she is, as you can tell from this presentation, fantastic. She'll get you answers back right away. Lisa, is there any last message you want to share with us before we leave today about birds, what we can do at home, anything?
Yeah, I guess I like the question that we got before about how we can get the word out. So I guess I would encourage all of you, talk to your family about this, talk to your friends, and let them know what you learned and that there's solutions to stop these birds from dying, because this is a preventable issue and we all have the power to stop it. So yeah, spread the word.
Fantastic. It was one of our questions on YouTube. It's the best thing you guys can do. Take action yourself. And again, for those looking for the dot tape, feather-friendly dot tape, really, really cool product. You saw it in the presentation and helps save a lot of birds. So get a chance to do that if you can. And Lisa, what we do at the end of every session, I'm going to bring in everyone, all those people that said happy birthday to your budgie. And if you could join me, all our classes, Miss Becker, Miss Oakes, Chloe, Joe, and Miss Argan's class, and saying a big thank you and goodbye to Lisa today. You're all in.